Right, so ethnic cleansing in Britain. And no, I'm not talking about small boats or anything to do with migrants either. This is ethnic cleansing of British people happening under Keir Starmer. And it is all to do with a certain airport expansion. Because the third runway at Heathrow, well, that'll need a bit of room, won't it? And to make room for it, a lot of people, a lot of property is going to have to go. But where? And if you want to stay in London, well, can you afford to? To make room for a third runway with all the noise and pollution and sheer lack of necessity for it, a lot of people are going to lose their homes, and only those of significant means will be able to buy a new house elsewhere and stay in the same area. When I talk of ethnic cleansing, the ethnicity in this example is that of ordinary working class people. The kind of people who would work at the airport for one, now getting shafted in a crueler and more damaging way both economically and environmentally than even the Tories saw them. So is it a little wonder that said ordinary working class people are turning elsewhere to other parties? And what's the mainstream media fixates on Reform UK? A poll carried out that dropped just yesterday showed a bit of a surge for the Green Party, and in light of policies like this one from Labour, can we see a bit more of that to come? Surely we could do with it, couldn't we? Right, so the Heathrow expansion plans are getting shredded quite readily across social media. It's not like me to pick up on something they are actually covering, and covering quite a lot. I go for the stuff they tend to ignore after all. But one of the big consequences of their plans is something they are not talking about, and that is the human cost of it. And this isn't getting picked up because whilst it might be an expansion of Heathrow capacity, most ordinary working class people don't use such facilities, use these airports regularly. And actually they face significant displacement. So there's a gentrification argument here that isn't getting well made in the media, and it does need to be talked about. So sure, Starmer and co want a third runway. This is a plan that has been on and off the table of numerous governments, but none ultimately have pushed ahead with it until now, it seems. Despite Rachel Reeves claiming in another ridiculous speech yesterday that a third runway would see Britain remain within its carbon targets, that's for the birds. Though if we're going to bring up wildlife for a moment, telling us all that the bats and the newts can sod off in the name of growth doesn't inspire much of a green agenda being at play here either. Not from a government led by a self-professed hater of tree huggers like Keir Starmer. Sure, big business are loving these plans. Why wouldn't they? Reeves wants private sector cash to build it after all. So who will end up benefiting and profiting from it all ultimately if they are rubbing their hands together with glee? The question of national interest and Reeves apparently being prepared to do anything to achieve some kind of economic growth whilst acquiescing to the rich paymasters of the Labour Party these days to retain their support both financially and via the billionaire-owned media in positive press columns. That fundamentally simplifies matters down to where this story is ultimately concerned. Labour want growth, but growth for whom? If you're working class, you might get a holiday once a year, go away for a bit, and maybe abroad if you're lucky. Possibly the only time, therefore, you actually use an airport, in which case. So who is this third runway really for? And is it in fact actually needed? Those opposed to such plans are those it will not benefit. Increased pollution, decreased air quality, and regardless of what your feelings about London's ULEZ zones are, everyone wants cleaner air to breathe ultimately, and therefore, while it might surprise some, it really oughtn't surprise people at all that even though he's a Labour right-winger himself, Sadiq Khan is opposed to his own party's plans for this third runway and has called it out already. This is a story that goes beyond just another desperate attempt at growth, come whatever, though. Reeves, frankly, is the sort of person who'd sign each and every one of us up for experimental drugs trials right now if she thought she'd get economic growth out of it. But who Labour now serves, and who they do not, could not be made more starkly obvious than with this Heathrow story. Because the party of the working class, as Labour is meant to be, are instead seeking growth for the rich, who will be the investors, who are their donors and funders now, and are doing so at the expense of the working class, who that party was formed to represent. Because who do you think has to make room for this third runway? For one, the flight path goes over a big chunk of the M25, so the disruption to commutes, as a section of that would surely end up having to be put through a tunnel, would be insane. The economic cost of that I couldn't possibly fathom either, but some clever bod ought to have crunched the numbers on that. Plus the fact several waterways would also have to be rerouted, additional cost there as well. But more than that, there's the human cost, because in the path of this runway lie numerous villages, notably those of Colnbrook and Harmondsworth. Now, Harmondsworth has as many signs saying "Stop Heathrow Expansion" as they do street signs, and not without good reason either, because half of this village would have to be bulldozed to make room for this thing. This is a village where at its centre is a war memorial. There are Commonwealth war graves in their cemetery. There is a pub there that dates back to 1067, and perhaps the village is most famous for having been the place where the bouncing bomb of Dam Busters fame was developed. Half the population of the village will have to relocate, and where some perhaps have the means to do so, many of them would still resent having to, especially if they've got family ties to the village that go back some way. Others of lesser means, though, ordinary working class families, may not be able to afford to relocate at all within London, given the price of housing there now. Where are they supposed to go? Do they not work hard enough to deserve to live in London where they happen to be from? Perhaps they work at the nearby airport, so how long will their commute be now? And where are you getting staff for the new runway if you price the old staff out of the area at that? House prices continue to spiral upwards, and nowhere is that more obvious than in London. So what we have here, by clearing these people out to make way for this runway, is an exercise in ethnic cleansing, in a sense, since the working class will be priced out of the area. Gentrification. Those that remain, those parts of the village still there are concerns as to whether the older listed buildings there, so much closer to the public safety zone as they will be, won't be able to stand up to the noise and reverberation caused by more flights, closer flights, which could render more property unsafe there and put more people out of the area. And it's significant financial loss at that. Are we to believe that private investors who will want to maximise profits over all else are going to give these people above market rate for houses to be demolished? It's not just planes taking off here, it's pigs taking flight as well, isn't it? Labour is well and truly turning its back on the working class in a way that's never been more obvious, exploiting them and discarding them, and now, with this third runway, will drive them from the area too. They couldn't be more Tory if they tried, but even the Tories didn't go this far. And even the Tories were not so brazen about how little they care for the environment either. Where the media platform Nigel Farage's Tories on steroids outfit as the alternative to both Tories and Labour here, Reform UK Limited, softening us up and indoctrinating them as the only alternative, at least some people, it seems, are thinking more carefully about such matters. Not being sucked in by the same snake oil salesmen that duped the nation over Brexit, but an actual viable alternative that is actually progressive too. A poll by Whitestone Insight, a Westminster-based consultancy who have done a poll, commissioned by the comic that masquerades as a newspaper, the Daily Express, has given the Green Party a surprise bounce. Hardly what you'd expect from a polling company doing research for one of the most right-wing rags going. Their Twitter account is quite pro-Heathrow expansion from what I've seen as well. Very jobs-focused, despite the question of where at least some of these workers will yet be living. Yet the Greens are up 6 points to 13% in their poll, putting them ahead of the Lib Dems. Though obviously the bit they'll be more focused on will be Reform being up 9 points and Labour down 10. Still, it does show that for some people, critical thinking does exist, and media indoctrination is becoming more questionable. We just still have a long way to go to reach a lot more people, clearly. A valid argument being made right now is that the Green Party just aren't being loud enough themselves, though there is too much timidity amongst them compared to all these very vocal, very awful other parties. And there is ample opportunity here to position themselves as the new party, the new place, the new home for ordinary working class people on the issues that really do matter. Policy areas that mean something that Reform are frankly awful at. Mouthing off on populist issues that get media attention, but not anything on what really matters to our day-to-day lives. Here's a prime example, an environmental disaster in the making that will make rich investors richer at the expense of ordinary working class people. Environmental and social justice issues rolled into one. Everything the Green Party these days stands for. So really, I say to the Green Party leaders, it's sink or swim time, guys. And I say this as a Green Party member myself, of course, as regular viewers will know. I want to see more noise being made about this by you. It's an opportunity to take a political lead on the environment and standing up for working class people, and an opportunity to say to them, Labour has abandoned you. If you think millionaires like Farage and Tice care, you must be joking. Come listen to what we have to say. And oh look, Green Party Deputy Leader Zach Polanski has a message about all of that right here.
It's a story I'm hearing over and over again. I used to vote for the Labour Party, but the party has left me. And look, we don't have time to mess around. There's a genocide in Gaza. There were literally racist riots on our streets last summer, and Reform on the rise. And what are this government doing? They're cutting winter fuel payments for our grandparents while still refusing to tax the super rich. And we need pro-migrant rhetoric right now, but what we're getting from Keir Starmer is the complete opposite. So I get why people are disillusioned. But Reform is not the answer. They're not some sort of anti-establishment party. They literally are the establishment. The only thing Nigel Farage and his mates are interested in is more money and more power for themselves and for oil and gas giants. So we need to come together. That's you, me, everyone. Teachers, doctors, nurses, cleaners, whatever you do, or even if you're out of work, everyone has to count. We need to come together and protect our National Health Service. Nationalise rail, water, energy. Stop ridiculous new runways. Make sure that we're tackling inequality in society. All of these things are possible, and they're possible by you joining the Green Party. So do it today.
Great message, and forgive me, a shameless plug. I don't often do it, though, for the Greens. But I don't care either, because you won't see that on the mainstream. So let's ram it in where we can. It is a message that must increasingly come from those all too timid Green MPs, though. Meanwhile, in a real show, if this is how Labour treat their own, they really couldn't care less about you, an horrendous ultimatum has been put to Labour MPs to accept or else, whilst for other MPs it seems you can even break the law and Starmer will fight to save you from losing your seat. Get the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe to ensure you don't miss out on new daily content, and it also helps support the channel as well, which is very much appreciated, of course. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.